everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. First Monday of February. We are in that swing into spring, the last hell month. Although yesterday, Nate, it was 70 degrees in Missouri. So, and a beautiful day. I know you're not really a sports ball person, and neither am I, but go Chiefs. Anything that beats the shit out of a California team is going to be like, that's my only sports is like fuck California and fuck Chicago, and that's my only sports things. And luckily in St. Louis we hate both of those things for reasons other than like, god damn you for being large cities with bustling metropolises and not being the murder capital of the world. How dare you? So I got that going for me. How are you doing?
Fine. I mean, it's not that warm here, but it won't be that warm here until actual summer. So it's good. I mean, my wife and I were looking at the figures for sunrise and sunset data, and I think it's like 2 more weeks before the sun starts setting after 5 p.m., which, considering that through December and into early January it sets before 4 p.m., it'll be so nice. And I think it's like the last, like basically March 10th or 12th or something like that is when it starts setting after 6 p.m. So that'll just be like, wow, okay, I can start feeling like a normal human being again. Because I'm telling you, it's weird. I don't really remember it hitting this hard in Alaska, but I think the reason for that was, number one, I spent a lot of the winter in Alaska either at training or on leave for the year that I was there for winter, and then every other year that I was technically stationed there, I was deployed. And so I just missed out on the really nightmare dark that you have there. But my God, having the sunset so early, like I wasn't expecting the weird kind of psychological consequences, and not just like feeling down or whatever. It's more just like feeling tired, like the extent to which you really want to nap at like 4:30 once it gets dark, and then come bedtime you're like, I'm weirdly not tired, even though I'm not sleepy, even though I'm tired as fuck, if that makes sense. And so I'm very excited for it to get back to like normal, what feels like regular human boundaries of sunlight. And obviously I realize an incredibly spoiled person from having lived in basically like temperate American climate my entire life and had been used to that. But Lord knows I can only imagine what it's like for people in, like northern Scandinavia. That maybe that's why they make a whole culture around like, snuggling around the fire and coming together as families to plan on how to put immigrants on islands, because it's just so dark and foreboding.
Speaking of putting immigrants on islands, how has Brexit been going? Have you guys started purging yet?
So Hussein was telling me that the other night he was walking back to the train from our studio, and there's this pub in Watney Market, which is like an open air market, but it's part of clearly what looks like what we call council estate. It's basically like public housing that was probably built in the 60s or 70s. And so you have these like open air stalls and stores, but then the buildings that are sort of like forming the channel where this market is, it's like a pedestrian market, are all old council buildings. And so Whitechapel, and particularly this part of Whitechapel, is really, really Bengali, like South Asian. But there are obviously like Tower Hamlets, the borough is actually not. I mean, it's like a third South Asian and like a third white. I think there's actually more white people than there are South Asian people here. So there's this pub, and it's like very covered in St. George's crosses, which are like the English flag, like not the British flag, but the English flag, which is normally is a pretty good indication that they're either going to be super into football or racist or both. And we joke about it being the EDL pub, the English Defence League, who are like a far right organization, sort of like the English nationalist Proud Boys. And Hussein says as he was walking by on Friday night when like Brexit became official, they were having a Brexit party, and there was just some like middle-aged white lady out there smoking, just screaming English at everyone who wasn't white who walked by. And it's just like
that's about right.
Yeah. So that's pretty much what it is.
Congratulations, you all can do racism out loud, just like Americans can.
Well, what's also funny, too, is number one, the people that they want to deport, that they think Brexit lets them deport, aren't EU citizens. And for another, the joke is that, I mean, we don't have to get into like the technical specifications of the EU. There's a lot of bad things that come along with it, but obviously, like, if you're breaking with EU regulation so that Britain can become even less regulated and shittier for workers, it's not a good thing. But the joke that you get seeing bandied around is basically, by going from a completely free trade relationship with the EU to trying to negotiate a thing where they're going to have to, come up with tariffs and stuff, you've basically Britain has become the first country in the world to declare sanctions on itself. And that's not unfair in terms of how it's actually going to play out, I think. But who knows? Everything's dumb. They're going to blame it on foreigners somehow, like they always do. This is rainy turf racism island. I mean, normal place full of normal people. But I live here now, and my life is here. So you know what? Fuck it. Ride that shit into the sunset like you're, I don't know, like, I guess it's mixing a metaphor. Ride that shit like you're jumping off the bomb bay, riding a fucking bomb, into a nuclear war like you're Slim Pickens in Dr. Strangelove.
Well,
the bomb is racism.
It's certainly a theme. It's certainly a theme of everything is going to hell. Speaking of everything going to hell, you guys are. I'm hoping that France finally, reignites something from the 1700s and decides to go back to war with England. And we get some feudalism out of this. But, America's going to come to the aid of England probably, and that's okay because we're going to fucking landmine the shit out of England. And I'm sure that you guys over there don't have enough unexploded ordnance. And wouldn't you just love to have more?
So the funny thing is there actually is a ton of unexploded ordnance here, but less so. I mean, most of the stuff that's on land obviously has been discovered. Most, not all of it. Like periodically there'll be construction and they have to close down a construction site because they found bombs from World War II. But one of the big problems is there's a fuckload of unexploded ordnance in the ocean. So in the English Channel and the Irish Sea, and that's not just from World War II, some of it's from World War I as well. Famously, the most recent one that I can think of is there's a huge wind farm being built off the coast of Norfolk. And it's like at current, I think it's the biggest single project, and it's in like 4 phases. The first phase is open, and it's by far the biggest wind farm operational in the United Kingdom. It's like, I mean, the big ones were like 600 megawatt. This is like 1,200 megawatts. So like it's a huge wind farm. And so every single one of those turbines, they have to go to the seabed and dig up and install these pylons so they can put the wind turbines in. And they had to shut one down for a while because there's a fuckload of German bombs that had fallen into the North Sea. And so, yeah, like that will stop a construction project, and delay the timeline for a significant amount of time. And those bombs are what, 80 years old? Going on 80 years old? I mean, the Blitz was 1940. So, I mean, 80 years old. Like, legitimately, it's been forever. Never mind landmines in places like Afghanistan, Pakistan border from the Soviet Union, or Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia from the Vietnam War and like the sort of Indochina War. When you think about the U.S. bombing and mining the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the Vietnamese War in Cambodia, the Khmer Rouge, all that stuff, like all that shit's still around and they're still incredibly dangerous. I mean, in Afghanistan, I don't know if you experienced this, but I definitely experienced it where, they bring in kids who'd been wounded because they'd stepped on a landmine and, on its face, you couldn't be sure if it was an IED that was set, like an actual new IED, or if it was a landmine from the Soviets. And most of the Afghans, when you talk to them, they would just say mine or minuna to talk about what that device is, because it's a mine to them. It's not just because whether it's homemade, with a pressure switch, or it's something the Soviets put down in the 80s. It's the same thing, the same result.
Right. It still blows up. Yeah, I think Bagram still had a minefield on it.
Oh, yeah. Dude, when I was in Bagram in 09-10, yeah, there were sections that were, fenced off. It's like danger mines and stuff. And there were like old Soviet, like Waz and Kamaz trucks, like rusting out, and like old rail cars too. And I was like, where the fuck is the railroad? There's so much stuff there.
Did you go to the Soviet aircraft graveyard when you were on Bagram? Was it on Bagram no, where was that? There's maybe it was Salerno, I can't remember, but there's like just off from somewhere, there's just there's a shitload of like old Soviet airplanes that are just rusting out. And they're like, you go check them out, go take pictures or whatever. But
no, I never went to Salerno. It's funny because my brigade headquarters was at Salerno, but I never made it out there.
I can't remember where. I don't know. Maybe it was on Bagram. No, I feel like
I don't think it was on Bagram because I think if there had been one on Bagram, it would have been cleared off because they had to redo the runway. They cleared all that shit and scrapped everything because they had to like the PX at Bagram. I remember this. The PX was actually in an old Soviet like base building, and I'm pretty sure the original control tower they were using in the early days on the north side of the airfield was also Soviet, like was built by the Soviets. So, like they had that thing up and running so fast. I don't know if it was, if they would have had the space to throw all the fucking aircraft. Also, they massively expanded Bagram. So you reckon that like if they had a thing like that, that would have been the first to go, to like scrap that shit, get rid of it, so they could then use the land to build. God, they were making it so big, dude. When I came back, when I was on my way home and I was stuck on Bagram, I remember taking the circulator bus that goes around the perimeter, and it had gone from being like a 25-30 minute ride around the perimeter to like an hour because they expanded the base so much. There's just so much construction that wasn't there the year before, which was them kind of ramping up the surge. But yeah, I wonder what the fuck's going on there now.
Yeah, I would love like not to go back to Afghanistan or Bagram as like a soldier, but just to like fly over and see, because like those Soviet, like there were Soviet buildings that I worked out of that we called Motel 6 and Motel 8. And that was just where our people were headquartered, because they're like, this place seems not as bombed out, but you could still see like old Soviet buildings that were like riddled with bullets and shit, and it's like that's where the enlisted folk made their last stand while the officers all fucked off.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, friend of the show, Joe Glenton, who's a British Army veteran, was actually just in Afghanistan filming a documentary. And they were out. He was actually like out riding with the ANA, like going to these villages and interviewing people. And he just got back and he was just like, "Hoo boy, it's a bit interesting." He wasn't in the north when he was deployed there. He was in Kandahar with the British Army, but yeah, he was in Kabul and Jalalabad. So they drove like in like a road convoy between Kabul and Jalalabad, like in old American Humvees, which is crazy. I mean, like part of me is jealous, part of me is like, whew, don't want to be doing that.
I made that run more than once. There's the road between Jabad and Bagram you had to go through the mountains, and there was this one mountain that you went down that was just nothing but switchbacks, just to get down the mountain. And it was always frightening to go through that. And we did it not in Humvees, we did it in SUVs, like non-armored SUVs whatsoever.
So you were there in 2004, right?
Yeah, this was before IEDs were really a big thing. And at one point when we were going through there, we were holed up for like 4 or 5 hours waiting to get through the switchbacks because a jingle truck had tipped over. And there's no AAA out there, man. They had to fucking figure it out because that was the only way to get through this mountain pass. And there's a truck that just fell over, and like we couldn't do shit. Like we didn't have a wrecker. We were just a bunch of Americans in SUVs. We're like, I don't know, y'all figure it out because we got to go too. We got the guns. I don't know what you want. So I mean, yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do that shit anymore.
Oh yeah, same. And I was just thinking about the landmine thing that how much of a disaster that winds up being and how much more difficult that makes things. And the idea that the U.S. now reserves the right to lay mines is just ridiculous. So we found this article on Task and Purpose written by not friend of the show, Jeff Smeagol. The headline is, "The U.S. military can officially sow the earth with landmines again." And the opening paragraph reads, "The U.S. military is now free to use landmines all over the world, but only 4-star generals can include landmines in war plans, and the defense secretary must personally approve deploying mines," a top defense official said on Friday. The White House first announced on Friday that President Donald Trump had ended a 2014 policy that prohibited the U.S. military from deploying landmines outside of the Korean Peninsula. Quote, "This policy will authorize combatant commanders in exceptional circumstances to deploy advanced, non-persistent landmines specifically designed to reduce unintended harm to civilians and partner forces," unquote, the White House's statement says. That sounds like a contradiction in terms.
Wait a minute. First off, 2014, like...
It's funny to me that they only declared that in 2014. So, I mean, who knew?
Were we putting out landmines beforehand?
No, I think that we weren't doing it, but I just don't think that it was. What this is basically saying is that this is a policy. Like Donald Trump's whole presidency is, we're going to burn down every single thing that Obama did. So even if it's relatively benign, it doesn't matter. They have to undo it because Donald Trump got elected because white people lost their minds because a black guy was president, and so it has to have never happened, and so they have to erase all evidence of it. So this is just the kind of shit that goes down. I mean, and so in a way, I understand where they're saying, like, for example, in the author's prose, not a quote here, it says, "Mercado said he did not see the need to use landmines in Afghanistan, Syria, Niger, or other war zones that don't involve a near-peer adversary." So what that sounds like is that if we got into a shooting war with Russia or China or something along those lines, they would put them down. But the thing about it is here is, part of me is like, okay, this is just like a pro forma thing that they're doing to, performatively undo Obama's legacy. And another part of me is like, yes, but that doesn't. How is that this basically then gives somebody like Stephen Miller the ability to be like, we have a serious problem here. We need to put landmines on the U.S.-Mexico border. Like, that's where I think it's going. Of course, I'm not basing that on like tactical observation. It's more that's my sort of general mood sense that when people talk about this stuff, this is what they have in mind. And
it's an option. That's the problem. It's
exactly.
It suddenly it goes from
them.
Yeah, it goes from something like, of course we wouldn't put landmines on American soil to stop immigrants from coming over. Like, I mean, we already see that the wall is falling over in strong winds, and there's parts of the wall that like they have to open up because of floodwaters, because it's just massive erosion, and they have to leave these doors open for months, which is like, yeah, people just come and go. Like, the wall itself is obviously a boondoggle, not just because it's a racism wall, but also because it's just poorly thought out, poorly constructed, and involves literally stealing land from people so that the government can put this thing up. But now, you've got that option. You've got the ability to say, well, maybe if we need to put down landmines, and let's be honest, it's not going to be that hard to find a 4-star general and a defense secretary who'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, if we get Trump for another 4 years, I'm not saying that there will be landmines put down. I'm just saying that there's not a zero chance of it anymore.
Well, I mean, exactly. And I also think that there was recently some op-ed that people dug up from 2016, where it was like on the eve of the election, and someone basically said, don't worry, the institutions are strong, the military and the State Department will stand up to Trump. If Trump gets elected president, there won't be a wall, there won't be religious-based bans on immigration or travel bans, he won't pull out of the Iran deal, the institutions will confine him. And of course, every single thing about that is wrong. And so when people say, oh, don't worry, they won't do this, it's like, well,
right.
Nothing matters. Nothing matters to these people. Like, they're going to do whatever the fuck they want. And
they're probably gonna try. Maybe they won't, but there's gonna be an attempt, I'm sure.
The idea that you have nothing to worry about has been proven wrong over and over again. And whether it's like the horny war professors or whomever, or it's professional journalists, it invariably seems to come down to this idea that they try to turn around any cause for concern and say that the libs are hysterical and that like the proud August institution of the U.S. military will stop this from happening. And it hasn't, and it won't. I mean, the U.S. military is struggling to recruit people with language skills while it's kicking people out of the military who enlisted because they have language skills. Like, it doesn't matter if it's self-defeating. It doesn't matter if it winds up undoing priorities or, contravening longstanding tradition. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. And none of them are going to pay a political price for it either. So when you have this situation where they can get away with anything, it seems to me really short-sighted and really self-defeating to look at it and say, oh no, that just seems unreasonable. That's impossible. That could never happen. Decorum just wouldn't allow it. I mean, they just added Nigeria to the list of travel ban countries. Like, what the? Why would you? What? Yep, yeah. They did it. Do you know why? Because they hate black people. That's why. It doesn't matter that Nigeria is like half and half Muslim and Christian. It doesn't matter that in aggregate, immigrants from Nigeria to the United States are some of the most educated immigrants that come to the United States. It doesn't matter. They hate black people. They're going to do what the fuck they want, and nothing's going to stop them. So, stop pretending it's impossible.
It's very reminiscent. One of the immigration bans they put on is they want to make sure that you have money and that you're making money. It's like, poor people come here and like build this country up constantly. Like, St. Louis had the thing going with the Bosnians, and we gave them a lot of money to come over here and come to St. Louis, and they really built up a lot of the really shitty parts of the city. But yeah, it's not nothing that happens now is done because none of it's done out of altruism. And I mean, don't get me wrong, America has never done anything out of altruism, but like now it is very specifically, go fuck yourself. We're America and we're going to do whatever we want. And that's, like you said, there's not going to be and then tomorrow things are going to be bad, but this is a slow erosion. And I've told people plenty of times that America as this great experiment is not going to last. No empire does, but we are actively stepping on our own dicks constantly through through capitalism, through greed, through just massive corruption. And I mean, just look at the impeachment trial. Just like, hey, we should call this witness. No, we're just not going to do it. Why? Because fuck you. That's why. Because we like the president and we're in charge, so we're going to do it. And nothing fucking matters. And Nate, you and I once upon a time raised our hands and said that we're defend the Constitution, but goddamn, the Constitution was written by some fucking idiots who did not.
The Constitution sucks ass. That's the thing. Like, it's bad. We need a new one. And everybody who thinks that it's this storied document that's going to save America from its own worst impulses doesn't know anything about America.
Nate, what else from the 1700s is anybody just like, oh, we should continue to do that? It's like when you look at advertisements from like the early 1900s and they're like, you got a cough, try heroin. Like, we know not to fucking do that anymore because heroin is really fucking bad for you. Like, or the pit bulls, they're just they're a nanny dog, and like, look, here's a picture of I just leave the pit bull with the baby for about 3 hours and everything was fine. Like, no, don't fucking do that. We know better. Why does the same thing not apply to like the literal foundation of this country, other than like basic racism and people wanting to do the like this is how we used to do things and this is how we're always going to do things. And like, even though you can look back in the time, whenever somebody says traditional families in America, it's just like, man, read anything about like the 18 and 1900s. Like, there's nothing fucking traditional about then that's happening now. So why the fuck do we do this with the Constitution? It's just batshit insane, and that's just how that is going to be our downfall right there. Is our demands to cling to these old parchments of paper that were written by people who could not even fucking conceive of what would happen in 250 years. Like, try to imagine, like, right now, sit down and try to write rules for people in the year fucking 2250. Write some rules for those people and try to figure. I mean, they still owned slaves back then, man, like regularly, and decided that slavery was perfectly fine, and we're not gonna write it out of our national interest while they're building the fucking Constitution. Anyway, landmines, don't fucking do it, man. Come on. But we're gonna. I do like that these have a self-destruct after 30 days. That's an interesting little addition to it. But I guess we have landmines. Are we the ones that mined the DMZ? I mean, it seems like this article seems to say that
I'm pretty sure that we did, but also we don't really control the DMZ anymore, in the sense that we used to do a lot more activity on the DMZ ourselves in cooperation with the South Korean military, but like, we were absolutely leading it.
So do you think we have a map of where every mine in the DMZ is?
I'd hope so, but I mean, having spent time in Korea, that map was probably like in somebody's POV that got sold by mistake. Like, who even fucking knows? I mean, I always thought that they had everything wired tight with like loadout plans and shit for what would happen, because like they've been prepping for a potential war on the Korean Peninsula for 50, 60 odd years. But actually, I got there and it's just Groundhog Day forever, and so nobody knows shit. Nobody knows anything. So I mean, I like to hope that like USFK G2, they've got that information, but they might not. You never know. What I do know is that the senior responsibility for the DMZ is the Korean military. They do it themselves. We do have some folks doing stuff in certain areas, not just at Panmunjom, but also like further out, like on the East Coast. But the idea that we're the ones running the DMZ, like, that's not been true for almost 20 years. Once they renegotiated the Status of Forces Agreement, we took a very different role in South Korea. So we probably did do the mining, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. But like since 2002, like, we haven't, to my knowledge. Might be wrong. So Korea experts, if I'm wrong, please yell at me a lot, because I deserve it for running my mouth and being a pundit who's not even doing research. But as I understand it, we haven't used landmines in the current conflicts we've been in. I do not believe we used them post-Vietnam. To my knowledge, we might have. I'm not sure. It's possible they may have laid some, that then got cleaned up afterwards in the Iraq or in the Gulf War, but I'm not sure. I know that doctrinally, like, it's a thing you learn about, but it's just, when do you actually have mines at your disposal? I don't know. I never have. I've never heard of anybody who had. Maybe they do in some scenarios, but I sort of doubt it. Besides, like obviously claymores and things that are, you initiate them; they're not victim operated.
Mm.
So another thing we want to talk about, another minefield we have to navigate, is the stupidity of military-themed outrage, specifically in this case related to the death of Kobe Bryant in a helicopter crash. Why are people tying that to the military? Why would you? I don't know. But they did.
Nate, you got to respect the troops. I mean, there's one thing that I know as a red-blooded American is that at all points, at all times, you must be respecting the troops. No matter who dies, no matter what happens, whoever it is, if they're not respecting the troops, if they're not concerning themselves with homeless veterans, Nate, then they're not good Americans. Kobe Bryant died in the helicopter crash, tragically. We are not here to rehash anything about Kobe's past, his present, or the future of anything with Kobe Bryant's family. We are here, however, to talk about how anytime there's a celebrity death of any kind, there is an immediate backlash from conservatives, sometimes a lot of military people, this time a 2-star general, folding their arms across their chest and saying, well, what about the troops? And Nate, well, fucking what about the troops, man? Fucking who cares?
If the troops were NBA Hall of Famers, then I would care about it in this specific situation, but to my knowledge, they're not, so it makes sense why people would mourn the incredibly young passing of a very talented and storied basketball player who obviously had some fucking shit in his background, but still was highly regarded as a basketball player and as, an advocate for kids playing basketball. He died very young, very tragically. His daughter died with him, and another family, they lost their father, daughter, and I think a couple other kids. It was a horrendous tragedy. And so the idea that people would then turn around and say, it's wrong to feel grief for this person at all because a soldier died somewhere, just seems like really, really pathetic, I don't know, kind of like scolding fascism. Does that make sense? So imagine being a fascist, but really pathetic.
And the thing that really fucking kills me is that they're they start bringing up what about these soldiers that died in a helicopter accident 10 years ago?
Oh, more than that, dude. In 2005, I think.
Yeah. 15 years ago. So
basically, if you guys weren't following, military.com doesn't do the thing. Some websites like The Guardian here in the UK, for example, and other sites will try to do this, where if a story is getting shared, it will they'll have a thing built in the way that it generates a preview on social media to tell you what year it's from, so that when people share a thing, especially if they're just sharing the headline, which is the standard practice, they look at it and they realize that, okay, this is from 2005 or 2010 or 2015 or whatever the fuck. So in this case, people were rage sharing a thing and be like, no one's talking about this, but they're all talking about Kobe Bryant, who happens to be black. And what turns out is...
There it is.
30 Marines, 1 sailor died in helicopter crash. Yes, that's a tragedy. It's really awful. It happened January 26th, 2005. So I'm sorry, but the idea that this gets bandied around and used as a cudgel to berate people who care about the death of a guy and his young daughter and some friends of theirs who died horribly and tragically is such a fucked up thing. And it's I don't know, man. I mean, I just don't understand why people feel the need to do this. And it seems like this is very much like a conservative / reactionary thing to do. When anytime anybody shows any kind of outpouring of grief for someone who's not like William F. Buckley or Ronald Reagan, they lose their minds and say, how dare you? A cop was disrespected somewhere or a troop died in a conflict, even if it was people died in the Vietnam War. How dare you feel bad about a thing that happened yesterday? And it's just so absurd, and taken to its logical conclusion, it just winds up being this the weirdest kind of cancel culture you can possibly think of. Like I said, really whiny and pathetic. But also I'd point out that if Kobe Bryant were white and were a conservative, this wouldn't be happening.
Oh, absolutely not.
That's the thing.
If he was, and still a basketball player, if he was a white, MAGA-loving basketball player, then he would absolutely be lauded by the right. And anytime, if let's say what Kenny Chesney dies tomorrow in a helicopter accident, or if fucking Kid Rock gets like run over by a horse or something, is it going to be, well, I mean, it's tragic, but what about the troops, guys? And that is going to exactly be, I'm going to be that shithead online that's immediately like, you guys want to care about this $1 million rapper, Kid Rock. I just got to say, what about the $1 million troops we have overseas? What about those troops? And the logical answer is, if you want troops to stop dying, stop sending them into fucking places where they get shot at, or where helicopters crash, or where there's danger, because we, obviously should not be there for any reason. But
ladies and gentlemen, we were all heartbroken at the tragic passing of Toby Keith, who was bitten on the ass really hard by a wild boar and it got infected. However, he was not actually a troop. Despite having played concerts in Kuwait, he was not a troop. Therefore, it is extremely wrong for you to respect him and not respect the troops.
Kenny Chesney attacked by 30 to 50 wild hogs, and if only he had a machine gun that the libs took away from him, he would have survived. Once again, cancel culture has come for us all.
I mean, it is very strange when this happens, and I think it puts us in a weird position as veterans. And I mean, I have a veteran Facebook friend who's pretty insane. He's much older than me. He was, I believe, an armor platoon leader in Iraq. He's pretty hardcore, like extremely libertarian conservative. And I mean, some of the stuff that I've seen him say is like, okay, if we go back to Iraq, we got to take the gloves off and stuff like that, which is just like freaky genocidal murder shit, which I really don't like seeing. However, he also got on Facebook and was like, veterans, shut the fuck up. Kobe Bryant was a Hall of Fame NBA player. He was incredibly storied and accomplished. He died tragically. It's not all about you. Shut up. And I was just like, well, it sucks that you love genocide, but that's the right opinion.
We're making the thing is that we're making headway with somebody like that. And yeah, I can't, like, I mean, I get it. I get,
I don't get it. I don't get it at all. It's so weird.
I get respecting the troops is what I'm trying to get at. But and I understand, the diseased mind, the deeply diseased mind of a conservative to immediately have to make something where somebody that they don't like, or somebody who, they have to, because that's what conservatism is right now. It's confrontational and it's reactionary.
But it's confrontational in a really pathetic way. It's
really
either
is.
It's like either confronting the most weak and vulnerable and marginalized people in society and menacing them nonstop when they just try to like live their lives and breathe air, or it's then turning around and being like, I was disrespected, like filing a lawsuit because somebody didn't fucking salute the flag or some shit. That ultimately is what it comes down to. It's this like being a dude who threatens people in a bar fight and then calls the cops because someone made you cry. Like, it's the weirdest energy, and it's only gotten worse. I think it was always there, but I certainly think that post 9/11 and then during the Bush presidency, there was the victim complex developed with the idea of, oh, the media disrespects us. We're just patriotic. How dare they? We're true patriots. They're traitors, et cetera, et cetera. And then under Obama, it just got completely detached from reality. And so it's kind of decayed into a kind of like triumphalism about Donald Trump, but also this really whiny, pathetic worm shit where it's just this constant desire to be a victim who's victimized, and you're being victimized because the incredibly powerful libs, who are also incredibly weak and pathetic, have made you feel bad about liking patriotism or something. And when you dig down into it, it's always completely jumped up and hysterical. It's like this. Imagine getting furious about the fact that 31 people died in a helicopter crash in 2005 and they're not being respected, but Kobe Bryant is. It's like, it was 15 years ago. Like,
eternal respect, Nate. Eternal respect. All respect at all times.
How is that any different? How is that any different than being like, oh, Kobe Bryant died in a helicopter crash? Well, a plane hit the World Trade Center, and yet you don't respect that. Like, how is it really any different?
Were there any troops that died in the World Trade Center? Like, that's the real question. Are those the ones that we have to fully respect at all times?
Oh, I will say there was a guy, my God, it's a crazy story. And this is a complete aside, but you should really dig into this if you have the time. There was a guy who, I'm not joking, survived the Brinks truck robbery that I think it was the Weather Underground did in 1981, where they killed a couple of I think, off-duty cops who were moonlighting as security guards, and maybe some cops too. This guy was wounded in the shootout, survived, was then barely escaped as a delivery driver during the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993. He had been there to do a delivery, and I think he had just left when the bomb went off, and then he died on 9/11 doing a delivery at the World Trade Center.
God, that's like the guy who survived both atomic bomb drops.
Yeah, it's like, God rest his soul. It sucks. It's really bad. It's horrible. But there's also a part of me that's sort of be like, I might not want to go into that building again.
Nate, again, we must always be respecting. Always, you and I be respecting. Except, well, you and I cannot be respected because one, we didn't die, but two, we're leftists, and we didn't start a racist coffee company. We went the other way and did a leftist podcast, which doesn't make as much money, but also doesn't get us as very much respect. Though, maybe we can do like Nine Line one day and sponsor a war criminal and really boost our brand a little bit.
Well, I mean, I think about this, that for me, when I think about why we talk about the military and we talk about veterans stuff, is that I want people to be able to be informed about it. I want people to like have a level of sort of basis understanding of what an issue is, what those details are, or how a thing plays out in the military, what the military is like. But I want them to understand that as filtered through people who have done it, who aren't, starry-eyed about weird troop worship patriotic shit. Which is not to say that I'm like, listen to our podcast and then use that as the basis to disrespect all troops. Like, I mean, lol, that's a funny idea, but I don't think anybody's doing that. It's more, I want people to not have to get their information about what the military is and does from people who are liable to, whether or not they're Meemaw in fucking, Carmel, Indiana, or a two-star general in the United States Army, liable to share a news story about something that isn't troop related and forcibly relate it to the troops because they demand more respect for the troops. Like, it's a weird impulse. It's a very strangely, I would say it's uniquely American, but I do think that they do it here in Britain too. So I think that whether or not that's British insane nationalists or English nationalists, piggybacking off of what they've determined is obviously like a winning formula in America, or if this is just a tendency amongst weird, pathetic, lead-poisoned boomer brains worldwide. This is a thing that happens. And if you want to know what the lion's share of your tax money is going towards, it might be better to get that without being told that you have to, do 15 different weird genuflections anytime anything ever happens related to the military. Or not related to the military, but just somehow related in the minds of your Facebook uncle.
Yeah, well, one day when those feral hogs come for Kenny Chesney, will be my posting Magnus Opus will be that day.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that too sometimes, that there's an extent to which I just don't care about this stuff enough. I mean, I watched basketball a ton when I was a kid, like up until high school, college age. And I mean, I feel like if there was a sport I was going to care about, I'd probably care about basketball because, I played basketball as a kid. I watched it a lot. I know a little bit about it, so it's fun to watch. And I mean, I'm not dialed in enough on basketball to really tell you a lot about Kobe Bryant's legacy as a player. But I do know that he, obviously, like from people that I know who live in Los Angeles, it's a huge blow to lose him and to lose him so young because he was this massive icon for the city. And so I don't think it's wrong for people to feel that way. And I think it's really absurd that whiny, chapped-ass babies have to somehow relate this to veterans when it has nothing to do with veterans in the military. It just doesn't. It absolutely doesn't.
You know what? Mourning doesn't require any kind of prerequisites either. Like anybody can pass, and you can feel bad about it. Like Kobe Bryant had, there's a rape allegation, but there's also the good things that he did for the city and for kids. But he could, it could have just been a normal person. Like tomorrow, like my father could pass, And am I expected to get like a Charlie Kirk to pop up at the funeral and just be like, well, what about the troops though? You're sad about your dad. What about the troops?
I mean, that's
Like-
literally what they're doing, isn't it? I mean, it's so crazy. Like exactly that. Like the Matt Boris cartoon of the guy popping out of the well and be like, oh, you're sad that someone died. Well, have you thought about the troops?
Right. Like, and it doesn't, any celebrity can, like, I have not really been affected by a celebrity death because I'm just not into anything so hard that, I'd be like, oh, I will say when Aaron Eisenberg passed, who played Nog in Star Trek, that affected me a little bit. He wasn't that big, but, Deep Space Nine was a big part of me growing up, and I really loved his character and his character arc, and it was really sad for me. And I posted about it, and I've written about episodes that Aaron Eisenberg was in, and I've chatted with him on Twitter. So, like, when he passed, it's like, man, that really fucking sucks. That he was really cool, and I know that politically, he and I kind of aligned a lot, and there's a lot there, and it's okay. It's okay to feel bad about like a person who you might not know personally, but who like had an effect on your life in some way, shape, or form. And it's just really incredibly shitty to be a person that says your mourning and your sadness is not valid because of this other thing.
And it would be insane to do that in any other context. I just don't understand why people can't see how insane it is to do with regard to the military. The idea of telling people they're not allowed to feel grief for somebody who was a figure who they cared about, who they just knew in some capacity because of this abstract idea of respecting the troops. Like if it was anyone else, it was like, even if it was like respecting American cuisine, you'd be like, you're out of your mind and you need to be in a fucking home. But for some reason, because it has to do with the flag and the troops, people turn around and they're willing to entertain it to a degree that they absolutely would not tolerate it if it were any other subject matter.
Yeah, it's racism, obviously.
Yes,
I mean, there's
for sure.
obviously racism there, and it's also like begging for attention, needing to have attention, and doing it for clout, which is, I think, like it took me a while to realize on Twitter, I don't have to have an opinion on everything, and if I do have an opinion on something, I don't have to tweet it out. Like, I don't have to be a shithead. Like when Kobe Bryant died, I was like, that's really sad. I'm not a basketball person. I don't really know that much about him other than I know Kobe Bryant. Obviously he's an American icon, but but like all of these things combined, I was just like, I don't need to say anything about these things because you know what? I would have to force a tweet. I would have to force an opinion. And I don't want to. And it wasn't until other people, like two-star generals, started to say, well, what about the troops? And then it's like, okay, now I am invested in this because fuck those people. Let people just mourn this guy. Let people, because I would hate it. Like I said, I would hate it if I had posted about, I'm sad that Aaron Eisenberg died, and then suddenly gotten a shithead Charlie Kirk popping up on my mentions and telling me to go fuck myself. And that is, as you said, literally that's what this is. Is somebody is you're being told to go fuck yourself for clout, for somebody else's clout, to get a bunch of like boomers with 8 digits behind their Twitter name to retweet you to their 17 followers and say that's right, fuck this guy. What about the troops? While you do literally nothing for the troops at all, other than respecting us and then yelling at somebody when their little plastic flag made in Japan or China touches the ground. Like that's literally that's it.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing. I'll never understand it, but I do think that it's good for people to push back, even if the pushback is harder to do in person than it is online, which I get. I mean, I understand that when it's, a family dinner and you're dealing with your Facebook uncle, it's a little bit harder than in person or correction online. But I do think that it's good. It's good to push back. And I don't think pushing back requires, being like, lol, fuck the troops, I hope you all lose your legs or some shit, which I mean, I have seen before. That's not the point here. The point here is you wouldn't feel obligated to tolerate this kind of disrespect and generally antisocial or sociopathic behavior were it being used to berate you for your lack of fealty to any other topic. So don't accept it when it comes to, troop worship. You shouldn't feel obligated. And I mean, it's weird. I think about this a lot, actually. My my sergeant major who took over in the unit when I didn't go on this next deployment because I was PCSing to go to the career course. He was really young. He was like 35, 36 when he became a sergeant major. And he had been in Ranger Regiment like his whole career. And he basically gave a talk to our battalion assembled and said, listen, how many of y'all are volunteers? People raise their hand. He's like, all right, let me explain something to you. You volunteered to join the military, but now you're getting paid. Do you know of any other volunteers who get paid? So here's the thing. You're not volunteers. You elected to join, yes, but you make a salary and get great benefits, and you're servants of the United States. You serve the American people. That's all part of the soldier's creed. You shouldn't expect people to hold the door for you. You should hold the door for them. You should be the ones being selfless. Do not ever walk down the street and think that anyone owes you anything because you're wearing a uniform. And I was like, yeah, these privates need to hear that shit for sure. But also, I was like, that's such a rare thing to hear someone say. Like, not to say that they, your battalion leadership and such, it encourages you to have like a chip on your shoulder and run around being a fucking dickhead. But the idea of directly challenging it is so rare. Like, you just, in my experience, you didn't really hear it that much. And that was, I don't know, 2011, 2012, maybe. 2011 had to be. So like, it's just such a strange, I don't know how to describe it. Like, to me, it's really, really strange that it's taken so long. And I really don't think that people need to feel like in any way obligated to tolerate or entertain that. Fucking put it out of your mind. Tell them to go fuck themselves. It is so unbelievably wrong and disrespectful, and not in the way that they think it's disrespectful. It's disrespectful to like basic human decency.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mourn in the ways that you feel that you feel like you should mourn. It's 2020. Men can cry. Women can, keep a stiff upper lip. We can all just, be sad in the ways that lets us, deal with what we have and deal with what we're doing. And it's incredible to me for anybody to tell somebody else that their feelings are invalid, especially when it comes to a death. Like. It does like I say, as I said, no celebrity death has really like super affected me. Where I'm breaking down and crying. Like I remember seeing people cry when they heard Michael Jackson died. But there's not to say that it might not happen at some point in time.
But I mean, like, let me tell you a story really fast. Let me tell you a story really fast. One of my good friends died in Afghanistan the same day that Michael Jackson died, and there was some contention about like, people mourn Michael Jackson, but not this person. But the thing about it is, like, for one, I can't really speak for my friend, but I'd like to think, knowing him, that he would have been kind of embarrassed by the idea that people were trying to like begrudge folks for mourning the death of Michael Jackson and not mourning the death of someone they'd never met or even heard of. Like, it's a little bit absurd, I think. And I understand why people react that way, but I mean, it's just one of those things where it's such a strange dynamic to say you should feel bad for mourning a person who in some way affected you or you felt like you knew, even if you knew them by their work, as opposed to mourning someone you literally never heard of until I got in your face about it. That's just weird.
And who could also, in his own rights, have been a complete shithead or done terrible things or anything.
Might have mourned the celebrity that died because maybe they were a fan. Might have been a
huge. Yeah, there's no, like, if I had died on the same day as Michael Jackson...
It would have been fucking hilarious, wouldn't it?
Well, and also, like, if I could look down from heaven and be like, look, man, I didn't release the album bad, so I got
was gonna say,
nothing.
Like, I would, like, yes, I people who know me and care about me will mourn my death, but I didn't invent the moonwalk,
yeah.
All right? So, like, let's keep it in perspective, folks. I don't know. Yeah. Like, I personally think, I mean, it's a sensitive subject, but I personally think, I mean, knowing my friend, that he probably would have found it hilarious to have died the same day as Michael Jackson. Obviously, preference would go towards not dying. But
right, if you gotta die,
I mean, I don't know, man. It's such a fucking weird topic. I don't even know what the right answer is here because I don't even know if, like, is that like some kind of weird? Is my way of coming to terms with things to sort of reject the idea of piety at all? I don't know. I just think it's such a strange thing, and it seems to happen specifically in America and specifically when black people who are celebrities die. It's so weird. It's like the same phenomenon when that what's his nuts Rod Dreher said that he thought that Aaliyah having a funeral cortege was gaudy to the point of being vulgar, but then he wrote this like 2,000 word article about how like he wants to build a temple to like Italian salumi because like it's just such good food. It's like what? Like so yeah. I mean, let's not get it twisted.
The only good death monument is Hunter S. Thompson's double-thumbed fist holding a peyote button, shooting his ashes across the desert. And we should all be so lucky to have a friend like Johnny Depp to make that happen.
I always said, and it's weird because Cynthia has lived in Switzerland for a while. I've never been to Lake Geneva. I've never been to Switzerland aside from like an airport layover when I was 5. But I always said that if I died, I should be cremated and have my ashes spread in sight of the Freddie Mercury statue at Lake Geneva. Now, I'm not that big of a Queen fan, but the Freddie Mercury statue is fucking hilarious. And to me, something irreverent, something funny, something that can break up the seriousness of the moment is a better way to look at mourning, to remember that person's personality and like what mattered to them, than to run around browbeating people because you think that they should show some kind of, I don't know, like amorphous respect for a concept versus a thing that actually happened in their life.
I want to be cremated and my ashes spread in every Missouri cave that claims that Jesse James hid out there after a train robbery. I don't know if I'll have enough ashes for that because it seems like that's like literally every show cave in Missouri will claim that. Jesse James got around a lot.
Yeah, I mean, shit, you know, every. Well, I mean, that said, Francis, you could just get out of the military and gain a shitload of weight and then make sure you have enough ashes to cover all of that. But
there we go. Dry January is over. Time to get back to drinking a lot of beer and feeling like absolute ass in the morning again. Because that was fun. That's a fun time in my life, being in my mid fucking 30s. Anyway, Nate,
there's one other thing we should talk about before we go, which is if you like the way Francis and I interact, well, guess what? We had an idea for a bonus episode, but I was an idiot and I forgot to watch the movie, and so we had to do a full dad chat episode. And I actually thought it turned out pretty well. And as a result, we decided to put the full hour of dad chat with a big riff on the concept of communal stuff versus communal kitchens versus private kitchens, and what the goal should be of private sufficiency versus public luxury. And so I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll enjoy it. We're going to play a little bit of that, and if you are interested, I put it up at the $1 tier on Patreon because I was like, this isn't really a themed episode. This is just us fucking around. But if you enjoy it, let us know because we could obviously do more in this vein as well. So I'm going to play that real quickly.
I was just thinking about my deployments. Now you did patrols, but you had like a desk and everything when you were on deployment, right? You had like a place where you had to type up reports and shit, right?
Yeah. So when I was the headquarters XO, I had my own office, and so I like had a desk and an office and a SIPR computer, a NIPR computer, and was in the command room suite, whatever. So my first sergeant had his office, my commander had his office, and then like the first sergeant shared his office with the they call orderlies, I guess. You know what I mean? Like the couple of soldiers who do like bookkeeping stuff for the first sergeant and the commander. And then when I was at when I led at the OCCP, I had an office that was just like where we had all the crypto stuff that was like under lock and key, and we had some desks there. So I shared that with the communications NCO and my NCOIC and myself. So the three of us had that room to ourselves.
So when you were on deployment, what did you decorate with? Like what was the shit that you were just like, I want this for my, chew or my office or whatever?
Oh God. Oh Jesus. Y'all are gonna get the most true version of my personality.
It was anime posters, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't anime. I got made fun of for some of it for being people thought it was weird, but that was just like my first sergeant giving me shit, and he was a good guy. But my commander, I hated this guy so much, and he was such a blowhard, and he thought he was so fucking intellectual. And he tried to give me shit because I had studied abroad in France and that I was like a Francophile, and he was just like, the only thing that I appreciate about the French, because the French were like, the usual Bush-era shit, like cheese-eating surrender monkeys kind of shit. But he basically said that he respected the French's dedication to nationalism. And he was like, I'm a fan of nationalism. Nationalism's a good thing. And I was just like, man, shut the fuck up. Like, I don't want to hear you talk. I don't want your half-baked fucking theories. And so I was like...
It sounds like somebody who says, the Nazis were actually socialists.
Yeah,
it was
exactly,
in the name.
I mean, he was. I mean, I feel like that would be an unfair characterization of him because he was actually a Jewish convert to Catholicism. But I don't think he would have defended the Nazis, but he would have said something similarly harebrained. The thing that was funny though was, so I got on Wikipedia or I got on Google and I basically was like, what's the opposite of nationalism? And of course, you'd think that international socialism, but no. Instead, what came up was the Spanish Republicans, i.e. the people, the communist side of the Spanish Civil War. So I found a website that did canvas prints of propaganda posters, and I got like a fuckload of Spanish communist propaganda posters and ordered them to Afghanistan and put them up on my wall. So anytime he came in, it literally looked like a full-on fucking propaganda palace in there. And I was like, what? Deal with it. I like art.
That's great.
So that was my personality. When I moved to the smaller base, I had to pack all my shit up in like a Foot Locker or whatever. But in my bedroom, I had the room that I shared with my interpreter in my NCOIC. I had a picture of me and my brother at my parents' house that my parents had taken. One of my NCOs told me, he said we looked like the kind of, it would be like the band photo on a Beatles album, which is ridiculous. I had this like dresser that my dad had built, like a flat pack dresser. He actually built like homemade IKEA shit and shipped it to me, and I was able to like assemble it there, which is absurd, but I was just like, yeah, it would be nice to have a little dresser. And so my dad, being like the carpentry guy, he put this thing together and shipped it to an APO address, and it showed up. Similarly, he sent me a basketball hoop because I used it to bribe some guys at the ammo point. I can't remember what I needed help with, but basically, like, they had to help me out with some shit, and I was like, I really appreciate it. And the guy was like, well, my soldiers would love to play basketball, but getting a basketball hoop through the supply system is a fucking nightmare. And I was like, don't worry, Sergeant, I've got you. And so I got my dad to fucking ship me a basketball hoop from Indiana to an APO address, and so I bought them off good and proper. Yeah, so I mean, I didn't really have much decoration stuff. Obviously, I didn't have any anime prints, but I did do the thing in my one office with the Republican propaganda posters, and I'm still proud of that to this day because it's such a niche joke that you would have to like. There's like very few people would understand. Like nobody would know the joke unless they knew this fucking commander and they knew what he had said and they knew that like this was sort of in opposition to what he had said. But to me, it was like this tiny act of resistance, and so I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm doing it.
You had too much money, is what I'm hearing. Is what I'm getting out of this.
I was a single lieutenant in fucking Afghanistan, making Alaska BAH while I was deployed, paying no taxes. Like, what the fuck was I going to spend my money on? Like, at least I didn't buy I didn't build like a tree fort out of flat screen TVs and Ducati motorcycles when I got home, like every other lieutenant did.
Wait, did you? Quick aside, when you were in the military but living in Alaska, did you guys get that Alaskan oil stipend?
Well, you have to live in the state of Alaska for a full calendar year before you can apply. So Technically speaking, if you're deployed, that still counts as living in Alaska. But like I moved to Alaska in the beginning of 2008, but I would have to have basically the earliest I would have been eligible to apply for permanent fund dividend would have been 2010. Because I needed to spend the entirety of 2009 in Alaska before I was eligible. But by 2010, I was like, I fucking hate this state and I never want to come back here. And and you can get PFD while you're in the military and not living in Alaska. But once you get out of the military, if you don't move to Alaska and you have nothing to prove that you had intended on moving to Alaska until something changed with your plans, they can collect PFD back plus interest. And they are pretty aggressive about coming after you because, like, think about it, there's not that many people in Alaska. Like, they can home in pretty easily. And so
there's only 20 of you fucks will find you.
So to me, I was like, a lot of folks do collect it. Don't get me wrong. To me, I was like, I hate this state and I don't want to be fucking beholden to it in any way whatsoever. So I will just, once again, leaving money on the table like a true officer, but I was just like, yeah, fuck this shit. But obviously, like, you could have been like, well, gee, I wanted to move back to Alaska, but I got this great offer for grad school or something. I'm sure they would have accepted it. But to me, it was like, once again, spending money on canvas prints to own my commander with a joke he'll literally never understand. Similarly, leaving money on the table to own the state of Alaska. That's just kind of my personality, I suppose. And I was just like, yeah, this isn't worth the fucking hassle. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, I had a lot of posters in my chew. The only one that I really remember is a Canadian. Oh no, you know what? I had a lot of World War II propaganda posters because I love those. And not like not like the really racist ones or the anti-German or anti-Japanese. I had ones like I still have one that's like all the artillery cannons that has all the Allied flags on it. It says "United we stand, united we win." Um, and I've got a lot of like pro women ones. The prop be the be the woman behind the man behind the gun. Go make bullets for soldiers and stuff. But I had this like Canadian zombie fighting thing because I embarrassingly in 2009 2010 was a epic bacon guy. And that was the height of everybody loving zombies. I think I still have that. I shipped all that stuff home and then put them in frames and then hung them up in like my bachelor pad, but then like moved in with my wife and she's just like, you have terrible taste in wall decorations. Except for my propaganda stuff, which was all up in my office, and then in the new office, it's all going to be up there again too. And then for my desk, well, I was going to say my desk is we had shared cubes, so it was the fishbowl cube, so it was a cube where you're all like four people, all back to back, kind of. So and so I didn't really have a whole lot that I could hang up in there, but I did have a one of those little dunking birds, the little water dunking birds. And so anytime I wasn't at my desk, I had that thing going, so that people wouldn't, and I would just say, he's just doing my job for me. And I swear, I always wondered where like my quote work ethic came from. Like in Iraq when we were like I showed up to work at 9 and we worked until 6. That was our like kind of set time to be in the office. And like 5:55, I was packing my shit up. I remember one time my one of my sergeants was just like, "What? Where do you have to be? Like, why are you always like at this time? I need to get out of here." I'm like, "I'm off work, motherfucker. Like, I don't care if like if I was on a mission, sure. I wasn't like, oh, 6 o'clock, guys. I can't do this." But I have always been that this is the time I stop working, and I will absolutely stop fucking working. I didn't really have it, and I did not do very much in Iraq. I didn't do very much on either of my deployments. It was a complete waste of government time and government money. Everybody's time and money. I was always constant, just like 6 o'clock, I'm out of here. I would also go run. Like I had like a 4 mile run that I did every after work. But I was just like, I can't being in an office, man. I never want to go back to that shit. God damn. All right, everybody. So remember, you can get that at patreon.com/hellofawaydodie. You can follow me at ArmyStrang, follow Nate at In These Deserts. We are on YouTube. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter at Hell of a Way. And we are on our own website, hellofawaytodie.com, with merch, writings, all kinds of great stuff. You can sign up for our newsletter there as well. And remember, we do pay for articles. So if you are a person that's got something that you want to put out that you would love to have up on a website and then have somebody give you $50 for it, hit us up, Sergeant Joker at hellofawaytodie.com, or you can just DM me directly at ArmyStrang. So thank you all, and Nate, we'll talk to you next week.
Yep, take care.